All right, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. Thank you. There you go. Absolutely. Had to give it up. I told all my guys today, I was texting them. All right, 10 seconds. Are we on? Okay. All right, we'll call this general meeting, committee meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. We start with the following land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. We'll now take 30 seconds to reflect on these principles. Please stand for the singing of the national anthem. And the Council for the City of Peterborough recognizes the principles contained in our Constitution and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. All right, adoption of minutes, June 26th, August 8th. If I can have a mover, Councillor Duguay, any comments or questions, errors or omissions? All right, we'll take a vote. And that is carried. Mr. Clerk, any disclosure of pecuniary interests this evening?
Mr. Chair, I have Councillor Hakey.
Councillor Hakey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to declare on A1 award of landscape construction services for Broadway Park, Peterborough, Ontario, report CLSF PM 23-002 as Mason Homes is a client of our firm.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll move to our consent agenda. Committee members, let me know if you'd like to speak to any of the following. We will separate out 9A since Councillor Hakey does have a pecuniary on that. But is anyone interested in speaking to 9A, landscape construction services? Councillor Yell. 9B, June 30th financial update report. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Yell. 9C, corporate sector greenhouse gas emission inventory and update. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor LaChica. 9D, road widening conveyance for 735 Woodland Street. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Seeing none. And 9E, funding update for CMHA and Peterborough drug strategy. Councillor Hakey. All right, so up for consent this evening, 9D, moved by Councillor L, and we'll take a vote. And that is carried. All right, so our first item, 9A, landscape construction services for Broadway Park. Councillor L.
Through the chair to Ms. Blinsky, I was all ready for Commissioner Friedman, but he's not here, so I'll have to enlighten you. I have a couple of questions. Has any thought been given when these RFP goes out to, and there's multiple parks to be built, when you have a proponent that you would look out years and get the proponent, or whoever they are, the ones that bid on it, that they would be the selected one going years out. This would give them the opportunity to buy at a discount a park that may come in 2 or 3 years from now, and it would save in costing, because when we looked at the costing that went up for the park, it was substantial. So has there any been thought given to the RFP that you're bidding on, because there are going to be parks that are built into the future, the person would be bidding on parks that not for next year, but the year after that and going forward? Any thought been given to that?
Through your chair to Councillor Riel, we don't structure our RFPs in that manner because we are only awarding work where the budget has already been approved. And if we haven't received a future budget approval or pre-commitment for some work in the future, we wouldn't include it in an RFP at this point. We do have some processes through procurement where we have qualified vendors, but this isn't one of them, I don't think.
Through the chair to Ms. Bablinski, there's a park in both Councillor Baldwin and my ward, that's Willow Creek, that was dismantled. I was by there today. The developer, they dismantled the playground equipment. The developer has put infrastructure in the ground, but it lays fallow as we speak. This neighborhood has been without a park, I think, for roughly 3 to 4 years. What are the plans? Are we waiting for the developer to build? Because if we know with interest rates, commodity prices, it could be years before that development. It's been years before even the Willow Creek development has taken fruition. So when do the people in that area expect to get their park back?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Riel, I will turn that question over to Mr. Appleby, as I believe he has more detailed knowledge about the specific project.
Through the chair to Councillor Riel, the Willow Creek Park, the timing for that is really dependent at this point on the developer and how quickly they move forward with their development. So in order for a park to be established at the location, they need to register the final plan of subdivision. They need to create the piece of land that will become the park. And as part of that process, the developer will then be sort of grading and filling the land to make it suitable for park development. So the concept at the beginning back in 2010, when that site was first processed, was that the temporary facility that was removed would get relocated to this new site in the subdivision plan. As you'll be aware, that site's been draft approved. It has been pre-serviced, but in terms of getting it registered and creating the building lots, that is a process that is within the developer's hands at the moment.
Through the chair, I'll move the report, but I thought I should bring it up because both Councillor Baldwin and myself have been questioned on this here when the neighborhood themselves that did have a parkette that have been without a park for a number of years. It doesn't look to me like, even though there's infrastructure in the ground, that development is going to happen anytime soon. So here is a community that had a park that doesn't have a park now. So that's why I raised the question.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Reel. Moved by Councillor Reel of Councillor Baldwin, Burke, and Duguay. Councillor Baldwin?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at this $320,000 increase, more than what was proposed. I'm not sure who to direct the question to. So I'll just say to staff, Mr. Chair, is there any, I know we want to get the park built. It's been in process for quite some time. I'm assuming there would be no advantage to sending back and asking for another round of people to bid on this. Would that be correct? I don't know if that goes to Mr. Papadakis or who might be able to answer that. I'm assuming if we delay and go back to the process, Mr. Chair, we're likely to get a higher cost than is already there. Would that be a fair statement?
I think I can speak to that through you, Chair, to Councillor Baldwin. You're correct. If sending it back would slow down the timeline, we'd have to basically start from the beginning of the procurement process again. And so that would add time and cost escalations would be built in. That'd be the delays and like the consultants and their schedules would fill up. So there'd be that kind of issue as well.
Okay, Mr. Plinsky, thank you for that. It's just, we've been going through this, Mr. Chair, for quite some time. I can recall Councillor McWilliams coming to every general committee or council meeting, and we would always have an increase in costs. Didn't matter what project it was, there was always an increase in cost. And this is just an example of that kind of occurring. So I just put it on the radar there. I know staff is certainly cognizant of that. But if every project comes in $320,000 more than is budgeted, we talked last week about a range of increase to the taxpayers of 4.5 to 5.5. If we continue to see an escalation in every project that we're doing, I can just imagine what we're going to end up, to your point, a week ago, Councillor Beamer. So thank you, Ms. Poplinski, for your answer.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Burke?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Beamer, and through you to staff. I mean, my question is sort of following the line of questioning that's happened so far. And excuse me, I've never built a park, so it might be a naive question, but I know we've been coming off these budget guideline talks and we've been talking about the need, as council to try to find efficiencies. And I'm sort of recognizing some patterns. And one of the things that I see that I have highlighted is the consultant fee and the management fee, project management fee. And, while on their own, they might not seem like such a big number. I feel that this is happening a lot. So my question is, is that necessary? Are we doing anything in terms of like what Councillor Riel said to streamline those fees that are happening time and time again? And also, is there a precedent of us bringing these, having a project manager in-house or having an architect who can consult in-house?
Sure. Through you, Chair, to Councillor Burke. I'll start this off and I'll welcome Mr. Appleby to add anything that if I miss something. I don't believe we have a precedent for bringing that type of work in-house. It would require more permanent staff than the city has at the moment. And I believe than we've had in the past as well. I don't know the details of this project in particular in terms of how these specifications were put together that went out into the RFP, but I believe staff do this type of RFP on a regular basis for park, as there's a park project almost every year. So I would think that what's included is fairly efficient and streamlined, but there are a lot of efficiencies that you can gain by doing one at a time like this. So it's just the cost of the market. Would you like to add anything, Mr. Appleby?
Thank you. Through the chair, maybe what I would add is that, just acknowledging that parks, so we've just recently completed the park up in Heritage Park. It took many years to complete, and it was beyond sort of the original estimate, cost estimate that was first established for the project, and we sought various funding sources, additional funding sources for that project. At the end of the day, the cost of a park is dependent on the design. And for each park that we're working on, we go through sort of an independent design process in consultation with the neighborhood, try and figure out, what the neighborhood would like to see in the park, look at, what can we feasibly fit in the park and how much we can afford. And we try to make that work for the community. We're coming here now with this particular park because we've got the design completed. We've done the neighborhood consultation and we have a much better understanding now as to what it's really going to cost versus what we thought it might cost about 4 or 5 years ago when we first set this project up in the budget, really as kind of a carry-on of a pilot program that we had been working on previous to that. So I would say, it's a long way of saying, I guess every park is unique. And it's based on sort of a design that we create at the time that we're processing that park. And certainly we're always looking for ways to try and bring the cost down, make the park more sort of efficient from cost perspective, but still, ensuring that we're meeting both neighborhood expectations and the city's own park guidelines from a design perspective.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burke. Councillor Duguay and Baldwin for a second time. Councillor Duguay.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. To Spaplinski, do I understand a reading on a paragraph that talks about the project timing and initial bid, the increase, it talks about the past 2 years. So was the original budget for this park contemplated 2 years ago?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Duguay, yes, it was.
Okay. So with that in mind, I believe we've heard, certainly in recent times, from our Commissioner of Financial and Legislative Services, the escalating costs. I think all of us know, even if we do just construct a small fence, just the price of wood alone. So while it is a substantive increase, it is 2 years dated. I might ask on a go-forward basis for when we are contemplating accepting a bid, it would be purposeful that we have attached to the report the concept plan. It's very difficult for me to rationalize the amount. A picture would be very helpful for, I think, our purposes. Lastly, Chair Beamer, I noticed in the budget there are certain obviously fixed costs, the landscape architect, which I might even be subject to a provincial schedule. I note item 5 is a contingency of approximately 5% of the budget. So for example, if that contingency is not required, that can be returned to the Parkland Dedication Fund. Ms. Spaplinski?
Yes, through you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. Any budget that would not be used for the park would be returned to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was the extent of my comments.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Duguay. Councillor Baldwin.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll pose this one to Mr. Appleby. Brad, just like we're doing the new twin pad at the Admiral Park in phase 1, phase 2 is to be the aquatic center. And I know when your staff plans a park in a community, you want to have the best that you can put forward there and a plan and the consultation. Have we ever phased parks? So if we have $320,000 this year and we know it's going to cost, $700,000, would we ever budget the second part in a second budget year, or is that not the way to do these things? I know when you get started, you put resources and equipment in place and you want to get it done, but looking at potential budget implications down the road, have we ever tried one where we would phase what's going to go into the park?
Through the chair, I would probably have to defer to sort of our project management experts on that. But what I would suggest is that it's not necessarily entirely unheard of, but the city in sort of the model that we're working with at this moment for park development, we've really only gone through this process over the last couple of years. It's been Heritage Park, now it's this park, right? And these were kind of carryovers from a pilot program that we had established back in, I'm going to suggest 2013, 2014, where we were looking to sort of participate with developers on the implementation of parks. The one thing I would say though is, if we were to phase park development, right, it would probably add to the cost, right? To have that carry over another year, it would just continue the escalation. So I don't think it's really ideal to do that.
Fair point. Thank you very much, Mr. Appleby. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bell. Any further comments or questions? All right, moved by Councillor Reel. We'll take a vote and e-scribe. And that is carried. And we'll note Councillor Hakey did not vote or participate in the discussion. 9B, June 30th financial update. Councillor Reel.
Through the chair to Mr. Plinsky, I'll move the report. On page 24, schedule 1, it states that the Kofi dividend is $5,208,000. Where is the additional $1.8 million that, in my last days on Kofi, I fought hard to get that $1.8 million. Where is that shown? Because that is a revenue and I don't see it anywhere unless I missed it. That should actually be the dividend, should have been $7 million, not $5.2 million. So where's that showing?
Through you, Chair to Councillor Riel, I believe that additional dividend was treated as 2022 revenue. I will have to look into it then to get back to you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Riel. Councillor, are you comfortable moving it?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, okay, perfect, thank you. Speaking to it, Councillor Burke.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. I just have a question. And it's about the encampments part on page 4. I've been trying, to work with staff on finding out an exact number about how much we're paying for private security. I think it's quite clear how much we're paying for private security when it comes to the encampment. That number is here. And so, I have a question. My first question is, when are we going to look, if it's the council's will and the city's will to enforce encampments, when is that going to be looked at on the budget in a non-emergency way? So we don't have to just hear about this really high number after the fact, because it's being taken out of the emergency provisions. And this has been embedded in our culture in Peterborough and across the province. So would it not be prudent, if it's council's will to continue to enforce, to make it a budgeted item somewhere so we have some control and sense of that number? That's my first question. And then my second question is, are we going to get an answer about, how much the city as a whole is paying for contracted private security? Because I understand that it's department by department, commissioner by commissioner. And I've asked via email and publicly a few times. And I just, very respectfully, can we expect to see that in our budget talks, or when?
Sure. Through you, Chair, to Councillor Burke, I do have that number here. I was aware of your request. So in 2023 to date, we've spent about $950,000 on contracted security, so external security agencies. That includes security guards at City Hall for events such as tonight's council meeting, after hours, a library, a guard in the social services office, as well as some security for events at the Peterborough Memorial Centre, Quaker Park, and Del Prairie Park. And it does also include parking enforcement, as that's all contracted out to a company as well. So I don't have the details to tell you how much is sort of each place or each type of security, but the total so far this year is about $950,000. To your first question.
Thanks. And then for my first question, is there any talk in the discussions of the commissioners or executive level staff to rethink how we're taking the money to enforce encampments for the private security, from the provision part 8 of the procurement bylaw, like in an emergency sense? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's the plan, and we are doing that because the bylaw has moved under the new division, and that's the focus. So we are looking into that, and everything will be captured in the new plan.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burke. Councillor Duguay, you mentioned perhaps pecuniary.
Perhaps.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I was remiss in not identifying this earlier. In the motion, paragraph C, it speaks to a value of share of proceeds from the tax sale of 511 Romaine Street, which I believe might be affiliated with lands adjacent to the former Canadian Canoe Museum. And I am a property owner on Romaine Street. While I don't think it affects me personally, I think to be safe, Mr. Chairman, I best declare a conflict in this case.
Okay, you can certainly do that. So we'll separate out C. Mr. Clerk, would that be appropriate?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, if the councillor wished to be able to vote on the rest of the matters, that would be appropriate to do so.
I do wish to vote on the balance of the motion and apologize if this creates any additional administration, Mr. Clerk.
No, all good. All right, so we'll separate out C at the appropriate time. So thank you, Councillor Duguay. Speakers to just the report in general, Mayor Leo.
Yeah, just a quick point. The $1.8 million Kofi special dividend was based on their 2022 revenue. 2022 was a particularly robust year for that organization. And it's fair to say year to date, revenue has been fairly robust again with a situation where we're generating significant electricity both on the solar side and the run of the river side.
Thank you, Mayor Leo. Any further comments or questions to the recommendations in front of us? All right, so it will do moved by Councillor Reel. We'll vote on A, B, D, and E to start. All right, so A, B, D, and E to start. And that is carried. And now we'll vote on C, moved by Councillor Reel. We'll vote on C. And that is carried, and we'll notice Councillor Duguay did not vote or participate. All right, moving right along, 9C, Corporate Sector Greenhouse Gas Emission Inventory and Update. Councillor LaChica.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you, I just wanted to take the opportunity as the Environment and Climate Action Liaison to thank Acting Commissioner Papadakos and James Byrne, the team that works so hard to provide these excellent reports for us. It brought me pleasure to have the time with our peak committee to look at the data and the collation of the information that's here. We go through a somber time, and I've stopped to reflect, even since we met with peak, that we're reminded as we see everything that's been going on at such a pace in terms of climate change in these months, that our cities truly are at the forefront and the front that our battle against climate change will be won or lost. And we've seen an escalation of GHGs brought on by rampant forest fires throughout our country in the last couple of months. A war that continues and escalates in Europe, and we know that all of these things affect our environment greatly, and it's even immeasurable the amount of GHGs that have been released into the atmosphere globally. So that's why this information and all the work that goes into providing it for our city, for municipalities who are fighting climate change at the very forefront, we need to look and analyze. And I just wanted to ask the question to all of us. At what point do we consider expediting our efforts when we see from our report that there's a shortfall of 12% below our 2030 target? And, as I was reflecting and rereading this report, which I became familiar with earlier with Peak and just reading again on my own, I asked the question, and I perhaps Mr. Papadakis could respond to the place on the report on page 40, where we see that light duty fleet is expected to shift, and I'm talking about our transit and electrifying our buses. It comes up often in conversations about the pace that we'll be electrifying our buses. And the report tells us that the intention is to do it based on vehicle replacement schedules. And that seems sensible because we want to be responsible for the life of the vehicles we have. And we know that the alternative fuel study for transit will also help inform that just transition and that ongoing path towards electrifying our buses. We know electric buses are not perfect. But my question to Commissioner Papadakis is there any way that we could expedite our efforts to try and achieve what we expected to for 2030 by having flexibility and perhaps speeding up our transition to an electric fleet by moving our vehicle replacement schedules in tandem with the urgency that we're seeing out there? Could we do this? What can we do to try and achieve that 2030 target? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor's commentary, I would say that it's important to note that the shortfall is predicted with anticipated projects to date. So as was noted, the alternative fuel study for transit is ongoing, and that is looking at a range of alternatives because of different types of fuels and systems that need to be considered. There are a number of other projects that are in flight that are going to start to shape and frame the most cost-effective measures by which the municipality can reduce its greenhouse gas emissions while still maintaining service levels that we're responsible for. So the transit replacement will be, come with a recommendation. I think that one in particular also has to be considered in the context of the larger community, right? We need to recognize that transit, is a key community greenhouse gas emission reduction tool, right? Because it reduces the reliance on the single occupancy vehicles of internal combustion engines. So, one could make an argument that it's more advantageous for the municipality to assume additional emissions to provide an enhanced transit service to get more greenhouse gas emissions off of the road with car reductions. So I think there'll be an interesting conversation that comes forward when we get through the alternative fuel study, as well as the Climate Change Action Plan 2.0 project, which is just initiating to look at the broader community sector emissions. And I think so there'll be a fulsome conversation, with the best data we have available to inform that conversation to come in the next little while. The other key initiative that we need to recognize has key potential in reducing our corporate greenhouse gas emission footprint is starting on October 31st of this year with the source separated organics program. So with the launch of that, we are diverting huge amounts of organic material from our landfill, which generate methane when they decompose anaerobically, which is methane being a greenhouse gas that's 27 times more potent than carbon dioxide on a 1-to-1 ratio. So that's a key initiative that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. So the other initiatives that haven't been contemplated are that which we can do to reduce the greenhouse gas emission footprint of our facilities. So that project is also in flight, where we're modeling and designing interventions for the 9 largest emitting facilities in the municipality. And so those will come forward in the next little while for consideration for council for looking at improvements along the way. So bit of a long-winded answer, but I think it's a multifaceted, multi-pronged approach that's going to have to be considered in subsequent years when we bring this report every year to see what initiatives have been able to be moved forward or proposed through either in-year reports or the budget process.
Thank you. And it truly is a dynamic situation, and we so appreciate that that you're able to highlight and underscore all the things that are so connected to our moving forward with our emissions reductions. Thank you, Mr. Papadakis.
Thank you, Councillor Lachika, and I assume you're comfortable moving it?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Lachika. I have Mayor Leal, Councillor Duguay, Burke, Crowley. Mayor Leal?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Through you to Michael. Michael, has there been any update? A number of years ago, the city of Peterborough applied for funding through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Government Canada flows money to FCM. FCM approves applications for a series of loans and grants, I believe, for energy efficient buildings, houses, and beyond that. So have we got any recent information on that front?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that application is moving well, and I anticipate that an official announcement in that regard will be coming at some point when such time has been, when the funders have made it available to be communicated.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Michael. Michael, can you just to inform us all, what was the quantum of that application value?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So to your worship's question regarding that project, that's referring to the Home Energy Efficiency Program, which is a loan and incentive program to permit homeowners in the city of Peterborough to make energy efficiency improvements to their homes that will reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. It was in the order of around, the total program was looking at about it was about a $10 million program over 4 years. Some of that was some private capital that is being mobilized. Some of it is low interest loans from FCM. Some of it is grants from FCM. So I think ballpark $2.5 million in grants, $5 million in loans, and maybe another $2.5 million of private capital is sort of the rough capitalization structure of that.
Thanks very much, Michael. Just Mr. Chair, just a comment on electric buses. Those of us that were at AMO recently, when you engage in conversations with other municipalities who have gone down this route fairly quickly over the last little while, there continues, of course, to be operational problems in the wintertime, where the battery technology will continue to evolve. I mean, the batteries of today and the batteries of 5-10 years down the line will be quite different. So in those communities where they've employed these fleets, if they don't operate in the wintertime, you're bringing back your diesel-powered buses to fill the gap. You know, this is important that we move forward, but I think we have to move forward in a very practical fashion. And we still don't have the infrastructure yet at our public works yard to allow us to have a fleet of electric buses, and that will come in due time. And we do know that the city of Edmonton, of course, they've chosen to do a pilot with hydrogen buses because of their higher level of performance, particularly in cold weather. So, you know, when you're looking at data and evidence, at the end of the day, we'll need to collect all this data and evidence to ultimately make the right decision for the citizens of Peterborough when it comes to electrification of our bus.
Thank you very much for that, Mayor Leal. I have Councillor Duguay, Burke, Crowley, Lachika for a second time. Councillor Duguay.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. Similar to Mayor Leal, I did hear at AMO that municipalities are considering non-traditional fuel sources for their fleet beyond electrical. And I think the jury is yet out what is the most appropriate form of alternate energy in winter climate. One point, though, that I felt of interest when I read this report, it speaks to the Morrow Park Arena. And while it may forecast to add additional GHG emissions, one of the positive outcomes will be that our community residents will be no longer having to drive to Millbrook and Lakefield and Duro in their private automobiles to enjoy arena facilities. So in effect, I suspect there'll be a reduction in out of town vehicular trips say, 10 kilometers, 20, 30 kilometers. While it's still private vehicles, it's less time in cars. I also note that Morrow Park is on transit routes, and ideally, if we have our transit service working appropriately, perhaps there will be a transit utilization in support of Morrow Park. So I think there's a positive to be gained by bringing the replacement of Northcrest in a new arena to our community, which will show up on the private sector side. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Degay. Councillor Burke?
Thanks, Chair Beamer. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. And through the chair, my question is about like a little bit of a frustration that we're not hitting this mark, but I understand it. And I see the big ideas of, transit and the things that we're talking about. But my question through the chair to Mr. Papadakos is like, are we looking at things through a more like grassroots from the ground up approach? In terms of making some like incremental changes while we're waiting for the big changes to happen. And anecdotally, the reason why I say that is because I work downtown and I see today I actually saw the guy in the big pickup truck watering all the plants downtown with the old 2-stroke engine, right? And so like while we're waiting for these big strategies to happen, are we looking at more incremental day-to-day approaches that could work towards the same goals? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we are. Like there are a lot of low-hanging fruits and pilots and things of that nature that we're looking at. You speak to the use of like 2-stroke engines on a lot of our public works fleet. As an example, we now have we have an entirely electric public works parks crew as an example that we initiated this year. So they're running entirely on like their grass cutters, their line trimmers, all of their handheld equipment are battery operated equipment. So that's a pilot that we started this year because, and to some of the earlier comments that the mayor was making in terms of making sure that, operational considerations factor in the decisions we make. Obviously, that's, that kind of goes without saying that's something that we have an obligation to bring that, that holistic perspective. So that way we can the council can make good decisions for the community. So there's an example like of we've piloted that. We had to change some routes and some structuring because of things they need to do with swapping out equipments and changing like certain types of sizes of equipment aren't available. So the parks crew has kind of been, testing that and it's, going well. So that's an example of, changing out those small handheld gas powered equipment. Like that's a process that we're like running through on a more accelerated schedule as we have budget to do so. Snow blowers, for instance, a couple of the key facilities where maintenance crews use like snow blowers, we purchased and they will be rolled out this year, some electric snow blowers to see how those ones work. So there are a host of other, smaller things that that are ongoing. When I first took on this portfolio, I would say that the city was doing a bit of a machine gun approach. It was trying to do a little bit of everything. And I think there is value in focusing efforts and trying to focus on the big needle moving initiatives while still doing some of those, but not allowing that those smaller impact ones take a lot of the attention. We have limited resources. Let's focus them on the big initiatives that are going to see those, double-digit drops and things like that. While, I'd call that like kind of good housekeeping as things move on.
And then lastly, through the chair to you, thanks, Michael, for the work that you do. It's amazing. I think one thing as a councillor that would be really helpful to me and like also would align with the fact that the city has called a climate emergency, right? Has there ever been any thought given to having a climate lens placed on the reports that we look at? So for instance, we just looked at a report about a park being built. Do we have the capacity to place, the climate lens on that report so we have some sense of how we're entering into these projects through that lens?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we are in the process of updating the report template that will be being rolled out in the next few cycles. In the October cycle, we have a new template of reports, and so there is a section in there where we have identified under the strategic plan, under one of the pillars, for folks to specifically call out climate related impacts of the report if it's applicable.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burke. Councillor Crowley.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess to Mr. Papadakis. I know that the report mentions biogases in the wastewater treatment plant. Do we have any sort of plan, or is there any sort of plan to reduce that? Or does the waste management plan in October help to reduce that by limiting the amount of biocontaminants, I guess, into the wastewater?
So through you, Mr. Chair. So I think two separate things there, right? The wastewater plant and then the waste management plan, the separation of organics and all that. So this is a newer thing that we've looked at adding. One of the things that the wastewater treatment industry has come to terms with is there are off-gassing through that process of greenhouse gas, non-typical greenhouse gas emissions, things like your nitrous oxides that come from your settling tanks and clarification processes and things of that nature. So it's like looking to try to understand, what the greenhouse gas impacts of the treatment process itself are, not necessarily the energy or gas that's being used to run the process, which is how we historically done it. So it's just a bit of a, again, carbon accounting is a journey, right? Like as you learn, you do more things, you rebaseline, you kind of include things that you hadn't captured as effectively as you could previously. To the sort of second part of the question, as the wastewater treatment plant undergoes future projects, expansion projects, and water quality improvement treatment quality projects, those will look to streamline efficiency. Obviously, energy efficiency in wastewater treatments is critical because it's a very energy intensive process. And so then other opportunities for what can be done in future capital expansions will be considered. But at this time, there's nothing on the books, but that's an opportunity for future years to consider.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crowley. Councillor LaChica for a second time, and then Councillor Purnell. Councillor LaChica.
Thank you very much. I'm just so heartened by the discussion, because the fact that we're talking about it together with urgency will really make the difference as we make the unfolding decisions. Just one final thing, and I wanted to say that the mayor's comments around just fleets and our discussions at AMO, so valuable, and the fact that we as a council have made a plan for a transit garage that will accommodate the transitions that we will make as we have the alternate fuel study occur, and that we make decisions around the best vehicles, hoping though as well that we don't wait too long and err on the side of too much caution, because sometimes things aren't always optimal, but we can make decisions and move forward and begin to achieve our targets in the ways that we had planned to. We need to, I really think, try not to see the target move. And we worry about 2050 if we get behind in 2030. So I'm so glad that we do have our eyes on the right things, and that we've got a strategic way of coordinating our infrastructure with the changes that we make to our fleets and the big projects that we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you very much, Mr. Papadakis.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chica. Councillor Purnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to add some more positive examples of what we have been doing. This is not new. We have been working on this at least since my term on council, since 2010. This has been something we've been working on. For example, my first term of council, we reassessed all of the roofs on the arenas to see if they could support solar panels. The ones we could do, we've done. And all buildings going forward will have that in mind, including our new community complex, which is being built now. That is being built to a LEED standard, including the ability to put rooftop solar when those green energy contracts come back. So we're ready for it. Very important. And you, Mr. Chair, also as Chair of Fire, know that our new fire hall, which we absolutely need, is being built to a zero emission standard. Also very important. Even another quick example is our city square, which has proved to be an incredible asset in our downtown. The energy that we take out of the liquid to create the ice is used to melt the snow in the pedestrian areas. So it's this beautiful cyclical energy efficient way of handling such an important park. And another good example is the increase of trees that we are planting, not only as a municipality, where we have increased the number of trees in our parks, on people's properties in front of their properties, but as well as community partners. Green Up is planting trees. We have another program coming up, third year, in conjunction with Rotary and a number of private partners who are donating $17,500. Our city team are matching the efforts, and we're going to be planting 500 medium trees and 20 great big trees, actually in Bears Creek in your ward. So these are community examples and city examples of very positive things that we're doing. And of course, there's more to be done, and we're going to keep doing more. I just wanted to add those positive notes, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parnell. That's fantastic. And thank you for all you do on the trees and the programs you're involved in, picking up, garbage program, everything you do. So thank you. Any further comments or questions? All right, good discussion. Moved by Councillor Lachika. We'll take a vote. And that is carried. Last item for the evening. Funding update for CMHA and Peterborough Drug Strategy, Councillor Hakey and Riel. Councillor Hakey? Okay. Councillor Riel, you go ahead. You have the floor.
Through the chair, and thank you to Councillor Hakey. I will be making a motion to defer this report. First off, I'd like to speak to the first part of it, and that's a spectral meter. I have to question why it was the city's responsibility to purchase the new mass spectrometer when it should have been done by Peterborough Public Health expense. This piece of equipment has never been used. To my knowledge, no one has been trained on it. Even if it was used for the suspected drug tainted drug, it cannot, the staff there has no right to confiscate the drug from people that brought it in. Again, I have no idea. I know that they come here, and certainly as soon as somebody says something about opiate overdoses and all this stuff, we all perk up. But I think this was an expense that should have been expended to the Peterborough Public Health. They have the expertise. They're the one that's doing the making the notices of drug poisoning, and certainly it should have been an expense for them. The reason I'm asking for a deferral, I'm asking that this report be deferred until we get our heads around who is actually responsible for mental health. Under the Canadian Mental Health Act, this is a federal responsibility. I have to ask again, where is the province and the federal government on this file? This again is a download on the municipalities, as we are forced to go it alone on mental health. This is a budget issue. As we look at everything, and as it reports, no decision is required until August 2024. If you look on page 52 of this report, there was 319 people that were that they said that they touched over the year. That's one a day. If you go downtown on any given day, and I'm downtown quite a bit, you'll run into 4 or 6 people that I think they're in a mental health episode. Just last week when I was walking down George Street, there was a guy approaching me. His head was down, he was talking to himself, and all of a sudden he burst out screaming and yelling. That to me is a mental health episode. There was nobody to help the person, but just imagine of the storekeepers and the people that were around this person. And God love him, he needed help, but we going to attract people for downtown? Again, I have to look at this here, and the reason I'm asking for deferral, I want these people to come here and tell us why we're paying this here. The report does not do justification here. I can drop any graph here, but I think that we need to find out just what's going on with the mental health problem here. I think also, again, as I alluded to, I think the federal and provincial government have to take responsibility for this. If they're not going to increase the size of the mental health wing at the hospital so that these people can housed, we need to go back to a plan of institutionalizing people that have mental health issues. I'm not talking about putting people in there and turning the key and saying goodbye to you. But there has to be people that have to be housed for a certain period of time so that we can talk to them, we can get them on the right drugs that they need, we can get them the care that they need before you release them back into society so that they can be productive citizens. This is not happening. This is a stopgap approach. And certainly I don't see the numbers that justify this. This is a huge issue. It's a huge issue ongoing. It's a huge issue with mental health, but only addiction. So I want the people to come here and give us honestly a report and tell us exactly what's going on. Because we have until August 24th to make a decision on this, and that's why I'm asking deferral. I don't give a date when these people here. I think we can work that out with Commissioner Laidman, but I think there need to be an accounting here because throwing money at this here is like good money after bad. And so that's why I'm asking for a deferral.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Reel. So deferral is always in order. So Councillor Reel, this is what we wordsmith. Maybe just let me know if it's appropriate. That the report be deferred to clarify roles and responsibilities involving both the provincial and federal governments. And perhaps at some point we can invite our members of parliament both to come, but is that the essence of your deferral?
Well, I think also the people that we have here with either CMHA and certainly forecasting these people have to be accountable because that's the one we're paying to do this work. But the reference that I made to both the provincial and federal government, clean mental health is a federal mandated thing. That's their responsibility. They have let us down here. The provincial government is a flow through to that. And certainly on the addiction and mental health side, they need to be accountable. And they need to give the dollars forward here. But we need an accounting here because we're playing a part here. And every dollar counts on this file. But we're paying, this is a download as far as I'm concerned, to this council and this municipality on the mental health and addiction issue.
No, I agree with you 100%. So we'll wordsmith that and we'll include and associated support agencies. And I think that might include everything. So that is what we're speaking to. Further clarity from the provincial, federal governments and associated support agencies. Councillor Hakey and Burke. Councillor Hakey.
Thank you very much, Chair. I too am going to support this motion. The question that I had, Councillor Riel asked, and that is, with the mass spectrometer, can we confiscate those drugs? Apparently the answer is no. I want to find out because that's outrageous that we'd spend that kind of money and ultimately somebody could die. We go back and forth with the mental health and who's involved, but there isn't anybody, I believe, at this table that thinks that we can solve the issue ourselves. You know my background, you know my story. I'm a big believer in we need the services. I'm not denying that, and I want to do that. I want to support that, but we need the players at the table to tell us how they're going to do it. This, to me, what is it, $60,000 I think we paid, is money that could be spent on hard services for the mental health. So I'm going to support Councillor Riel's deferral at this time until we get the people in the room that we can ask the hard questions of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hakey. Speaking to the deferral, I have Councillor Burke. Councillor Burke.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. I'm not going to get talking about the mass spectrometer because how I understand that is that we paid for it and then our hands are sort of tied. I think it's at the CTS and they're going to use it as part of their harm reduction strategy. But what I want to speak to is the MCIT team. And, you know, I have not heard, and I asked around a lot of people in the community about like, where are these people? How are they doing these crisis interventions? How are they embedded within the police? What does that look like? Right. And I don't have any answers. And there's no answers in this report. Right. All it says, and Councillor Riel pointed it out, is that people have been quote unquote served. Right. And we were just in London and I saw a crisis intervention unit that they had there run by CMHA, and they quantified the work that they did by emergency room diversion, police criminalization diversion. So they had some real things to back up the work that they did, and I don't find that here. And I think that the biggest feedback we're getting from people downtown is that they are calling police for issues of crisis that have to do with things that the police, don't do, or at least that's what they're being told, right? So the community is looking for who to turn to in these instances. And so, with the deferral, I want to hear from the MCIT team to hear like what they're doing. Are there other agencies in the community on the ground that are doing crisis intervention already and can quantify that and can be embedded with the police? So maybe Chris Koala, or maybe through the chair, Mr. Koala could answer some of those questions. The first question would be please to follow up on this idea of people are served, like what does that mean? And then secondly, why isn't this coming out of the police budget if it's something that's meant to be embedded in the police? Thank you.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Burke. The way that the MCIT program works is it is driven by 911 calls. There are two MCIT teams. One is a permanent one funded through the Ministry of Health, and the second one is funded by the city's grant that was approved last year on a 2-year basis out of police services reserves from 2020. It was at that time that it was deemed appropriate investment of those funds by council at the time. They were requested for recommendations both from CMHA and from the Peterborough Drug Strategy, and cases were made for council to support those at the time. So just a preamble to your question, so it is when those mental health calls come into the police through 911 that when there is an MCIT unit operating, they are dispatched to those calls to deal with those situations versus any other regular constable who may be on the ground. The idea here is they not only address the initial call, but they do follow up with individuals as well. They are trying and do their best to prevent arrests or apprehensions of people dealing with mental health issues, so that they're not brought into the justice system and that they're linked up as best they can with referrals from the MCIT or CMHA staff worker that is there with the constable. So they are driving around town in a police vehicle with that MCIT constable to deal with those calls, so that dispatch triages them so that they are sent to those versus say an assault or a break and enter or something that is more criminal code related. And that's the nature of how that service is dispatched in the community.
Thanks. And then in terms of through the chair, the idea that balancing the feedback we're getting from the community versus the 319 people, which has been pointed out that that's less than one response call a day. Can you please speak to that? Is that an issue of capacity, or like I still am not really clear about how it works? So maybe through the chair you could explain, or we could hear from it when we hear from them. But they're just, are they the MCIT workers are in the police station or separately, or they have their own access to 911? Can you help me get some clarity, please?
Through the chair, they do have a desk at the police station, and they work those extended hours like mentioned in the report, so that they're working outside regular business hours. But the majority of their time is in vehicle. They do follow-up work when they're there a couple hours at the beginning of the day or sometime at the end of the day, but the majority of the time is in the vehicle responding to calls. I would ask for, I guess, a little leeway here. I'll give an example of how this works. I did have the opportunity to go on a ride along with the MCIT team for the majority of a day, or the majority of my working day, not theirs, that they didn't get any calls necessarily for service while I was there. They were, kind of guiltily feeling that they wanted a call. They don't want a crime to happen so that they could satisfy my needs, but the majority, all the work was all follow-up with people that they knew or they had interacted with before that were dealing with mental health or addictions issues that they had previous interactions with and prevented an arrest or prevented an incarceration. So the one that's of pertinence to me is they did prevent a suicide from happening on a particular day, and the fact that they called an individual that they became aware of through this individual's mother calling saying my son is threatening to commit suicide, and they had known about this individual. So the police officer called, and from a layman's perspective, sitting in the police vehicle, this fellow wouldn't have interacted with his team if they hadn't had that prior interaction with the MCIT team and had those discussions and trying to help this person with their mental health issues. In the end, it ended up having to apprehend him, take him to the hospital, and they admitted him there by force. But unfortunately, that was the end result. But the end result could have been far greater had that team not been there. So in the short time that I was in the vehicle, they made 5 or 6 calls. And these are people that they had dealt with before. So that kind of number feeds into the follow-up data, not those single individuals. So that gives a little bit of perspective on, well, one case does take a lot of work to make progress on a mental health issue. It's not a fact that they'd be seeing thousands and thousands of individuals. Fact that they saw the 300 and some odd, they see them multiple times, follow up multiple incidences, and in this particular case, prevented probably a disaster in our community.
I think that my final thought / maybe question through the chair is, like, I think that it's funny that you're saying that they're sometimes waiting for a call, because I get 4 or 5 or 6 forms of communication a day about this kind of thing from people in the community that are facing situations that are scary to them, or situations that they don't know who to call, and they call 911 and no one shows up, right? And so my question is, through the chair, are community members, for example, if a small business owner is experiencing something that they don't know how to respond to, and they feel that it's a mental health crisis situation that needs an intervention, can they call the MCIT team, or can they call the police and request someone to come right away?
Through the chair, because at this point it is 911 based, they'd be calling 911. So it has to be serious enough that you're calling 911 and it's not as a social service kind of call. They are able to call the non-emergency number and report an issue that they're dealing with. In my ride along, one of those was followed up on. It was actually a call that was 5 days old, that there wasn't a capacity to respond to it. But it was a 5-year-old call, came up on their monitors and their vehicles, and they took the time because they didn't have any pressing ones that they were engaged in. So they cleared that one off the call list. And I would take a little bit of exception. They aren't waiting for calls to happen. They have plenty of people that they're reaching out to as part of their follow-up. But when they are dispatched, like the case that I mentioned, that was probably about 4 hours of their time that day.
All right, Councillor Burke, would you like to go back on the list, or you all right? All right, thank you very much, Councillor Burke. I have Councillor Lachika, Mayor Leal, Councillor Duguay, and Parnell, and we have tightened up the motion a little bit, so it reads that report be deferred until the Canadian Mental Health Association and Forecast provide a presentation to Council on the programs that support the vulnerable population. Okay, Councillor Lachika.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kwolek, for that information and sharing those stories with us that help inform what MCIT's been doing for our community. As I read this report, I was struck. Well, I appreciated that the 4 options were presented. I see something like this, as a very important mental health support in our community. And I would hate to see that we lose sight of the value of these services in our community where mental health is an addiction and these things are crises. We need to make sure that we continue to invest in the services that we have like this, but connect with municipalities. And that was the beauty of being an AMO. And as Councillor Burke said, hearing that their MCAT and seeing that their MCAT worked effectively and seamlessly and it was moving, going and busy. Let's find out what London's doing right with their MCIT or anything different that we might apply in our situation to really utilize this mental health support. We need CMHA. We need to enhance our partnership with police services around mental health. So maybe let's use this opportunity as a way to make it better, to make it more effective, and to reach more community members that are in need of this kind of support. So I look forward to hearing from, if this deferral passes, from them so that they can give us more insight, so that we can hear where the gaps may be, and that we continue to work with police services to make sure, if we decide to continue to invest in MCIT or provide that support, that we're doing it wisely. So I will support the deferral, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor LaChica. Mayor Leal.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll support the deferral. But one of the big challenges we have here is when a report like this comes forward, you can see evidence that we're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the waters of healthcare. And the challenge with that is we're doing so with property tax dollars, a system that has been in place in this country for 156 years. We don't have access to progressive taxation dollars, nor do we, as some municipal leaders at AMO were talking about. Perhaps it's time that municipalities across Canada got 1% of the HST. If we're going to be called upon to do more and more of these kind of activities, we need to broaden our base of revenue. And I do know that 1% of HST will be a topic of discussion as we move forward. I look at $83,500. And I asked myself, would $83,500 be better invested? We do know Mr. Smith in a provincial government, their initiative on the treatment side with the former building of Canadian Mental Health in Ashburton Ward. Whether we took that $83,000 and made larger investments into that side of the operation and look at ways to bring people on a path of recovery, which I've always believed is the best option available. As we all grapple with mental health and substance abuse, not only in our community, but from sea to sea to sea.
Thank you very much, Mayor Leal. Councillor Duguay and Parnell. Councillor Duguay.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. I will support the deferral. My read of this report is the deferral invites key agencies to provide clarity insofar as their role and responsibilities. And I concur with Mayor Leal's comments that this is not the business that municipalities would ordinarily and should ordinarily find themselves in. I don't recall that the Municipal Act prescribes that municipalities deal with mental health issues. It falls under entirely different legislation. And this was a topic discussed regularly at AMO, about the difficulty municipalities are finding themselves in, and at times the somewhat either fragmented or reactive approach to a very difficult subject, which none of us in this room have expertise in. This is not our expertise. It's not necessarily staff's either in that direct sense. I would welcome the opportunity for the agencies to tell us what they're doing, advise us on their roles and responsibilities. I frankly don't see the deferral of impacting or affecting the current programs that are delivering. This strikes me as a bit of a preemptive measure. And if it returns in a timely manner, hopefully we'll be better informed and enlightened. I would support the deferral. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Parnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too will support the deferral for many of the reasons that have already been articulated. MCIT is definitely a needed service that we do need people, experts in mental health working alongside police with these responses, but that is, has been said, healthcare, not a municipal responsibility. And we were already having a discussion about how do we not take on more unmandated responsibilities onto the municipal tax dollar. And this would be adding more to that column of unmandated responsibilities for us to take on. But it is a valuable service. It's just the municipal tax dollar should not be paying for it. And just to say the police will pay for it, well, that's also the municipal tax dollar. So that doesn't work either. And I did want to clarify about the spectrometer. We did have a former councillor who was a bit of a bulldog about always confiscating the police reserve. If they had excess reserves left, or the surplus, I should say. And I do recall that year we did take half of that for various mental health and harm reduction strategies, including the spectrometer. So the previous council did authorize that money out of the police surplus to buy. Unfortunately, it's not in service yet, but it is a tool for harm reduction. But that was from a surplus, which last year there wasn't a surplus. So we can't count on these surpluses to take on these unmandated jobs anymore. We just cannot do that. But I will support the deferral. I want to hear from the Canadian Mental Health Group, as hopefully perhaps even the Save Injection site folks can come and educate us a little bit more, because I've got bits and pieces of information, but not all of it. And I think it would be good if we all had the same information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purnell. Yes, Mr. Commissioner Laban.
I was just thank you, Chair Beamer. I was just hoping to add to the motion if it was appropriate. At the heart of this is a police program actually that the city was funding. So I was wondering if it was possible to add to the motion that the police be invited, as it is their program, along with CMHA and Forecast, if that would be appropriate. Thanks.
Okay, so that'll be agreed upon by Councillor Ailes. So those will be the three agencies right now: Peterborough Police, Canadian Mental Health, and Forecast. Councillor Purnell?
Thank you. I did have a question, if I may.
Yes, of course.
I did have a communication earlier today with Councillor Laidman, and I just wondered about the funding going forward, for healthcare, and this being a provincial responsibility. So I wondered if we could give Commissioner Laidman the opportunity to talk about the options of perhaps using some of the provincial money that has been given to us, or if there are other grants that we could potentially try to apply for this.
Commissioner Laban?
Certainly, through you, Chair Beamer. Certainly, staff are always trying to maximize the provincial funding for any programs that are provincially related. I know there was a number of questions about whether we could have used the recently announced homeless funding. Certainly, that would be eligible for this, we believe. However, we're certainly fully maximizing that funding with the various homelessness initiatives, including the new Wolf Street modular project. Certainly, if there was ever any surplus or anything in those programs, we would always use provincial funding first. In the proposal that's in the report, certainly using the community development program funding through the community safety and well-being plan, that is shared 50-50 with the county. So that is another opportunity that we're ensuring that we're maximizing the city's contribution along with the county. So those are some of the means by which we did look at trying to utilize various programs. This was the best option that we could come up with to try to minimize the impact on the municipal tax base while continuing this program. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purnell. Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Baldwin?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Certainly, I'll support the deferral. I can tell you that the MCIT team is doing great work in the community. Just a question through you, Mr. Chair. I thought I heard the mover of the motion say this was a federal and provincial flow-through initiative. I'm wondering if we should not be inviting our MP and MPP to hear the presentations of council that's going to come, because ultimately I think what my councillor colleague was suggesting is that we need some financial resources paid for by the province and or the federal government. And if they're not here to hear this, I think it might be a good opportunity to invite them. And if they want to speak, they certainly would have that opportunity. So I'm just going back to you, to the main mover, to see if I've lost the interpretation of inviting the MPP and or MP, if that was part of his thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin.
I would be over the moon if they came.
All right. So
I would be over the moon that if they got up and spoke. I would be over the moon if they answered our questions. So certainly an invitation go out to them that the night that we're having agencies come and speak, that they are invited to listen to the debate, but also be participants if they would like to be.
No, that's very good. Thank you to both of you. So we'll add that as we'll add that and that our MP and MP be invited to attend the council presentations that evening and participate, something like that. So we'll just wordsmith that. Everyone give us 30 seconds. We'll throw the blue moon in there. Yeah. Any further comments or questions to the recommendations? Okay, just give us a second. Take your time, no rush. That our MP and MPP be invited to attend council to hear these presentations and participate. That's good, John. All right, moved by Councillor Reel. We'll take a vote and e-scribe. And that is carried. Thank you, everyone. We have no notice of motion this evening. Other business? Councillor DeGay, other business?
Yes, thank you, Chair Beamer. Just to advise council, as a heads up, that I would be looking for support in the form of a resolution at our next council meeting. And what specifically I'm speaking to is many of our fellow municipalities are asking the provincial government to review the current MFIP legislation, which I understand through my discussions with the clerk and my discussions at AMO is some 30 years out of date. We have also heard from the clerk's office that we have staff time and resources responding solely to freedom of information requests. The intent is not for a report, but rather that we adopt a resolution similar to many municipalities asking the provincial government to conduct a review. So that would be a matter I'm hoping to bring forward. I believe, Mr. Clerk, that would be through a motion, and ultimately council would consider a resolution similar to what we received in the last couple of weeks from several municipalities. Thank you, Chair Beamer.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor DeGay. Other business? Seeing none, motion to adjourn. Councillor Duguay, we'll take a vote. Yes. And that is carried. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening. See you next Monday.